The grand hall was alive with glittering lights and soft music. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, reflecting tiny rainbows across the marble floors. Waiters and waitresses moved carefully, carrying trays filled with champagne and appetizers, trying not to spill anything on the expensive outfits of the guests. The rich and powerful were all gathered in one room, laughing, chatting, and showing off their wealth. The air smelled of perfume, expensive food, and a touch of tension as everyone tried to make a good impression. In the corner of the hall, almost unnoticed, a young girl quietly adjusted the silver tray in her hands. She was the daughter of one of the maids who worked for the family hosting the event. She had grown up in the large house, seeing the sparkling life of the billionaire family but never being part of it. Yet tonight, she moved among the guests with a careful smile, keeping her eyes open and her mind alert. She was polite, patient, and used to staying in the background, but she had a curiosity about the world of the wealthy that no one else could see. The guests talked in soft voices, often glancing at their phones or at each other. Some looked down at the food and drink on their plates, while others whispered behind fans, making sure everyone knew the latest gossip. The young girl noticed it all. The quiet looks, the little gestures of power, and the invisible lines that separated the staff from the guests. She had always been aware of her place in the household, but tonight something felt different. There was a small stir in the room, a quiet energy that made her heart beat faster. At the center of the room, sitting in a chair with a gentle smile, was the billionaire's mother. She was elegant and calm, but there was a noticeable barrier between her and the other guests. She was deaf, and while some tried to communicate by writing notes or speaking slowly, the effort often fell short. The young girl noticed the woman's slight frustration, the way her eyes moved from one person to another, hoping someone would understand. Her heart tugged at her in a way it never had before. The young girl's mother had taught her sign language when she was very small. It had always been just a tool for daily life at home, helping her communicate with neighbors or friends who also knew a little. But now, as she watched the billionaire's mother trying to reach out to others, an idea formed in her mind. Maybe she could help. Maybe she could bridge the gap. The thought made her nervous, but it also gave her a quiet sense of purpose. She adjusted the tray again, took a deep breath, and started to move toward the woman. Every step felt heavy, but she told herself that being brave was sometimes more important than being invisible. Guests continued their conversations, unaware of the small act about to take place. The young girl reached the side of the chair and bent slightly, showing respect without making a fuss. She raised her hands gently, signing a simple greeting she had learned long ago. The billionaire's mother looked up, her eyes widening slightly. She recognized the signs immediately, and a spark of surprise and relief passed across her face. She signed back slowly, almost hesitantly, as if testing whether this young girl could really communicate with her. The young girl nodded and repeated her message, her hands moving naturally, with care and patience. The woman's face relaxed, and a small smile appeared, lighting up the room in a way that no crystal chandelier could. A few guests began to notice what was happening. Some stopped mid-conversation, curious. Others whispered to each other, wondering who the young girl was. But no one approached. They seemed unsure of what to do, perhaps thinking it was not their place. Meanwhile, the young girl continued, signing small, kind words, making the billionaire's mother feel seen and understood. Each gesture was gentle, warm, and filled with the sincerity that comes from wanting to connect, not impress. The atmosphere around them shifted. The loud clinks of glasses and the soft chatter seemed to fade for a moment, leaving only the quiet communication between two people from completely different worlds. The young girl's confidence grew with each sign, and the billionaire's mother responded more freely, her hands moving gracefully. For a few moments, the room held its breath, watching this unusual connection blossom. It was simple, human, and yet extraordinary in its quiet power. As they continued, the young girl noticed the subtle details. The way the woman's eyes softened when she understood a joke, the slight laugh she tried to hold back, and the warmth that spread across her face. She realized that this was more than just communication. It was friendship, even if brief. The young girl felt a sense of pride mixed with humility. She had not expected to become part of something so meaningful tonight. Other staff members noticed too, and some smiled quietly at her courage. They understood how difficult it could be to step into the world of the wealthy and to do so with grace. The young girl did not seek attention, but her presence and her actions could not be ignored. She was becoming a bridge in a room built on status and social rules, showing that kindness could cross even the widest gaps. By the time the first speeches of the night were announced, the young girl had signed several small conversations, each one leaving a trace of warmth in the billionaire's mother's heart. She returned to her duties quietly, but her eyes sparkled with the knowledge that she had done something important. She had stepped forward, not for recognition but simply because she could. And in doing so, she had changed the tone of the evening in a way that no one could have predicted. The gala continued with music and laughter, but now there was a subtle ripple of awareness. A few guests glanced at the young girl as she moved among them, sensing that something rare and genuine had occurred. It was a small act in a vast room of wealth and status, but it carried weight far beyond the glittering walls. And somewhere in that grand hall, a simple connection had been made, one that would leave an impression on everyone who witnessed it, and perhaps even change the way they saw the world. The young girl did not know what would come next, but she felt ready. She had found her voice, in her own way, and it had been heard. The night was still young, and the possibilities were endless. She returned to the edges of the hall, carrying her tray with grace, yet her mind lingered on the small but powerful bond she had formed. In a world that often separated people by money and status, she had found a way to reach across the divide, quietly, humbly, and beautifully. The young girl returned to her place among the other staff, but her mind was still with the billionaire's mother. She could not forget the warmth in the woman's eyes, the way she had smiled as if she had finally been understood. The gala carried on around her, with laughter and music filling the air. But for the young girl, the world had shifted slightly. There was a feeling of purpose now, a realization that small acts of courage could make a big difference. She carried her tray carefully, noticing how the guests moved and spoke to one another. Some were busy with selfies, others whispered behind fans, trying to impress each other. But the young girl paid little attention to all that. Her focus was on the woman in the corner, who seemed calmer now, more at ease, her eyes following the young girl occasionally with a quiet gratitude. The connection they had made was unspoken yet powerful, and it gave the young girl confidence she had never felt before. As she moved closer again, she noticed that a few guests were starting to whisper among themselves. Their curiosity piqued. They had seen her signing with the billionaire's mother and were unsure what to make of it. Some looked impressed, others puzzled. The young girl, however, remained completely unaware of their attention. She had no desire for recognition. She simply wanted to continue the conversation, to make the woman feel comfortable and included. The woman noticed her approach and began signing again, slowly and carefully. The young girl followed, her hands moving with fluid motion, repeating the signs and adding gestures to make them clearer. A small smile played on her lips, and the woman responded with a soft, genuine laugh. It was the first time the young girl had heard that laugh in the grand hall, and it filled her heart with warmth. She realized that her presence was making a real impact, that the simple act of communication could light up someone's entire evening. Some of the staff began to take notice as well. They watched quietly from a distance, amazed at the confidence and kindness the young girl showed. They had all grown up working in the shadows of wealth, always careful not to overstep, always careful to remain invisible. But tonight, she had crossed that invisible line, not arrogantly, but with humility and care. And it was beautiful to see. The billionaire's mother signed something longer this time, telling a story from her past. The young girl leaned in, her eyes bright with attention, signing back to show understanding and empathy. She realized that she was not just helping her communicate. She was also sharing in her experiences, hearing a side of life that very few had been allowed to see. It was a moment of connection that transcended social class, wealth, and expectations. A few of the guests, now more curious than ever, moved slightly closer, watching the interaction unfold. One of them whispered something to another, and a ripple of murmurs began to spread. The young girl did not notice. She was entirely focused on the conversation, on the way her hands and gestures could bridge a world that had seemed so distant. The woman's face was alive with expression, and the young girl could feel the joy and relief radiating from her. Minutes passed, yet it felt like no time at all. The gala continued, but for the young girl and the billionaire's mother, the room had become smaller, warmer, and intimate. They shared stories, jokes, and small bits of life that were never spoken aloud but understood perfectly. The young girl felt a sense of pride, but it was mixed with humility. She knew that anyone could have done this, but somehow it had been her who stepped forward, and it felt like a responsibility as much as an honor. The staff around her started to whisper quietly among themselves, some smiling, some nodding with admiration. It was rare to see someone so young handle herself with such grace, and yet she had not acted out of ambition or desire for praise. She had acted out of empathy, a simple human response to someone in need. And that made the moment even more powerful. The woman signed again, this time asking a question that made the young girl pause. She thought carefully before responding, making sure her hands moved slowly and clearly. The woman's eyes lit up with understanding as she signed back, and a wave of relief passed over her face. The young girl felt a deep satisfaction, knowing she had made the communication clear, that she had given the woman a voice in a room where her own voice was often ignored. Some guests were now openly watching, their curiosity overcoming their initial hesitation. They had come to see the wealthy elite, but they were witnessing something much more human, more touching. A young girl, unnoticed by most, had reached across the social divide and connected with someone in a way that no money or status could replicate. The room seemed quieter around them, the soft music fading slightly as if to give them space. The young girl continued, carefully guiding the conversation, encouraging the woman to share more. She laughed softly when the woman signed something funny, her eyes crinkling in a genuine expression of joy. The woman's laughter became freer, more relaxed, and a few of the staff couldn't help but smile at the sight. It was a reminder that kindness and understanding could shine through even in the most opulent settings. After some time, the billionaire's mother leaned back slightly, resting her hands on her lap. She looked at the young girl with a calm appreciation, her eyes warm and bright. The young girl felt a quiet pride, knowing that she had helped someone feel included and understood. She knew that what she had done was small in the grand scheme of the gala, but it was enormous to the woman she had just connected with. The young girl glanced around the room and noticed the subtle changes in the atmosphere. A few guests whispered to each other, clearly discussing the unusual interaction they had just witnessed. The staff, too, seemed more relaxed, inspired by the young girl's courage and empathy. She returned to her duties, carrying her tray carefully, but her mind was still with the woman, and her heart was light with the knowledge that she had done something meaningful. As the night continued, the young girl moved among the tables, always alert for any sign that the woman needed her again. She noticed small gestures, subtle signals, and she responded with care, ensuring that the connection they had built remained intact. Each interaction was simple, human, and filled with respect. She understood that the billionaire's mother, despite her wealth, often felt isolated, and she wanted to make her feel valued and seen. The guests continued their conversations, some still curious, some oblivious, but the young girl did not mind. She had found a space where her actions mattered, where she could make a difference, even in the smallest way. She had learned that courage was not always loud, and that kindness could create ripples that reached far beyond what anyone could immediately see. Hours passed, and the gala slowly began to wind down. The music softened, and the guests started to take their leave. The young girl felt a mix of exhaustion and fulfillment. She had never imagined that a simple act of signing with the billionaire's mother could hold so much weight, could create such a bond in the midst of luxury and status. Yet, here she was, carrying memories of smiles, laughter, and understanding that no one else had seen in the same way. As she finished her last round of trays, the young girl cast a final glance toward the woman in the corner. The woman's eyes met hers, and there was a silent exchange of gratitude, warmth, and respect. No words were needed. The connection had been made, and it would linger in both their hearts long after the gala ended. The young girl realized that sometimes, the smallest acts could be the most powerful, and that empathy, courage, and patience could shine brighter than any chandelier in the room. The young girl felt a quiet excitement as the evening continued. Though she had returned to her duties, she could not stop thinking about the billionaire's mother. Something about the way the woman had looked at her, the way her eyes had brightened with understanding, stayed with her. It was a small miracle in the midst of the glittering gala, and the young girl wanted to see it again. She moved carefully among the guests, offering drinks and appetizers, but always keeping an eye on the woman in the corner. Her tray felt heavier tonight, not because of the weight of the glasses, but because of the sense of purpose she carried. She had discovered a new kind of courage, one that was quiet, patient, and full of care. Each step she took toward the woman was deliberate, filled with the hope that she could continue to make her feel included and valued. The billionaire's mother noticed her approach immediately and signed a greeting, her hands moving gracefully, her face lighting up. The young girl smiled and signed back, and for a moment, the world outside their little corner of the room seemed to disappear. They were speaking a language that only they shared, a language of care and understanding. The guests around them continued their conversations, but the young girl felt as if they were in a separate world, one built purely on human connection. The woman began to sign stories from her past, small memories and moments that brought a sparkle of joy to her eyes. The young girl listened carefully, responding with empathy, asking questions through her hands, and encouraging the woman to share more. Each response she received made her feel more confident, more certain that she was in the right place, doing the right thing. It was a powerful reminder that listening and understanding could be as important as speaking. Some guests had begun to notice the interaction more clearly now. A few leaned slightly closer, curious about the communication happening before their eyes. They whispered softly to each other, trying to understand, but none of them approached. The young girl was unaware of their attention. She was fully immersed in the conversation, focused entirely on making the woman feel seen and heard. The sincerity in her actions was palpable, and anyone observing could sense it without words. The woman shared a small joke, a playful story from her youth, and the young girl responded with laughter and gestures of delight. The sound of the woman's laughter, though quiet, filled the young girl with warmth. It was a moment of pure human connection, unshaped by wealth, status, or expectation. The young girl realized that this was not just about helping someone communicate. It was about sharing joy, creating understanding, and building trust. It was a gift, one that neither of them could have anticipated when the evening began. The staff around them began to exchange glances, some smiling quietly, some nodding in admiration. They had seen many things in the grand house over the years, but this was unusual. They were used to strict boundaries between the wealthy and the staff, but the young girl had crossed that line in a way that was gentle and respectful. She had bridged a gap that many would never even attempt to cross, and she had done it with kindness and patience. The young girl encouraged the woman to continue sharing, and the woman responded with more animated gestures, her hands moving freely as she told stories of her life. Each tale was met with understanding and enthusiasm from the young girl, who signed back with care and attention. The room around them seemed to fade further, leaving only the two of them in their small bubble of understanding. It was as if the world had slowed down, giving space for their unique connection to grow. At one point, the woman signed something that made the young girl pause. She thought carefully before responding, making sure her hands moved slowly and clearly. When she finished, the woman's eyes sparkled, and a small, genuine smile spread across her face. It was a silent acknowledgement, a moment of shared understanding that needed no words. The young girl felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that she had helped the woman feel included in a world that often overlooked her. The guests continued their conversations, some watching with quiet curiosity, others lost in their own lives. But the young girl did not notice them. She had found her focus, her purpose. She was creating a space where the billionaire's mother felt valued and understood, and that was more important than anything else happening in the grand hall. Each gesture, each sign, was filled with intention and care, and the woman responded with growing trust and warmth. As the evening progressed, the young girl noticed subtle changes in the atmosphere. The woman became more relaxed, her body language open and confident. The young girl felt proud, not because she had done something extraordinary, but because she had helped someone feel seen in a room where appearances often mattered more than people. She understood that this was the true value of her actions, the quiet power of empathy and understanding. A few more guests began to take notice, whispering among themselves about the young girl's courage and skill. They had come to see wealth and glamour, but they were witnessing something far more meaningful, a genuine human connection that crossed social barriers. The young girl remained unaware, focused entirely on the woman in front of her, guiding the conversation with patience and care. The woman shared more of her stories, some sad, some joyful, and the young girl responded with understanding and support. Each moment built a bridge between them, a connection that was unspoken yet deeply felt. The young girl realized that this was not just about tonight. It was about the impact one person could have on another's life, even in a brief encounter. The woman's trust and comfort were rewards greater than any recognition she could receive from the guests. As the gala continued around them, the young girl felt a growing sense of purpose. She had discovered a strength within herself, a courage to step forward and offer kindness in a world that often seemed cold and distant. Each sign, each gesture, was a reminder that small acts could create ripples far beyond what anyone might notice. She had become a bridge, a helper, and a friend in a room full of people who often valued wealth over humanity. The woman's laughter and expressions of gratitude gave the young girl a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. She realized that empathy was not about recognition or reward. It was about understanding and connection. Tonight, she had achieved that in a way that felt natural, meaningful, and entirely human. The grand hall, with its glittering chandeliers and fashionable guests, became a backdrop for a story of compassion and courage. The staff began to notice subtle changes as well. Some moved more confidently, inspired by the young girl's example. They whispered quietly, admiring her patience, her skill, and her ability to make someone feel included. It was a reminder that courage and kindness could influence others without words, creating a quiet wave of impact throughout the room. The young girl returned to her duties for a brief moment, carrying her tray carefully, but her mind remained with the billionaire's mother. She noticed the woman's eyes following her, filled with warmth and appreciation. The young girl smiled gently, signaling that she was there, ready to continue the conversation whenever needed. It was a silent promise, a commitment to empathy and understanding that transcended social divides. Hours passed, and the gala began to wind down. The young girl continued to move among the guests, her focus still on the woman. The connection they had built remained intact, a quiet testament to the power of patience, courage, and genuine human kindness. The woman's expressions of joy and trust filled the young girl with a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had made a lasting impact. As the evening drew to a close, the young girl felt a quiet pride. She had discovered something important about herself, that small, thoughtful actions could create meaningful change. She had reached across a world of wealth and status to offer understanding and connection, and in doing so had created a memory that neither she nor the billionaire's mother would ever forget. The night had been full of glitter and luxury, but for the young girl, the most valuable moments had been the simple acts of empathy and courage that connected two hearts in a quiet, unforgettable way. The young girl felt a quiet excitement as the evening went on. The gala was still buzzing with conversation and laughter, but she was no longer just a server carrying trays. She had become someone who mattered in a small, meaningful way. Every few moments, she would glance at the billionaire's mother and see a soft smile, a light in her eyes that seemed to shine brighter than any chandelier in the hall. That smile gave the young girl a sense of purpose she had never felt before. She moved carefully through the crowd, making sure the woman was comfortable, adjusting her chair slightly when needed and offering small gestures of kindness without making a fuss. The guests were busy admiring each other's clothes, jewels, and status, but the young girl had a different focus. She was attentive, patient, and fully engaged in the silent conversation that passed between her and the woman. Their connection was growing stronger with every sign, every gesture, and every shared smile. The woman decided to tell a longer story, something she had clearly held in her heart for a long time. She signed slowly, her hands moving gracefully, her expressions full of emotion. The young girl watched closely, her hands following each sign carefully. She responded with understanding and empathy, making sure the woman knew she was truly listening. The moment was powerful not because of grandeur or wealth, but because it was real and human. The young girl felt honored that she had been trusted with this story. Around them, some guests had begun to notice more clearly what was happening. A few leaned slightly closer, curious, yet hesitant to interrupt. They whispered softly to each other, clearly trying to understand, but no one came forward. The young girl, however, remained entirely focused on the woman. She did not care about the attention or whispers. Her concern was for the person she was communicating with, and her dedication showed in the gentleness and care of her gestures. The woman laughed quietly at one part of the story, her eyes sparkling with joy. The young girl smiled and laughed along, responding in kind. For a moment, the sound of the gala seemed distant, and all that existed was the shared understanding between the two. It was a small miracle of human connection, one that could not be bought or commanded. The young girl felt a warmth in her heart, knowing that she had brought happiness to someone who had spent much of her life navigating a world where communication was often a challenge. The staff began to notice the young girl's courage and patience. They exchanged quiet looks of admiration, understanding that she had stepped beyond the usual boundaries. She had acted out of pure kindness, without seeking attention or reward. The young girl had bridged a gap between worlds, connecting two lives in a way that the wealthy guests could not. And she had done it with humility, grace, and respect. The woman's stories became more personal, touching on moments of joy and sadness from her past. The young girl listened intently, responding with signs that expressed empathy and understanding. She asked questions, encouraged the woman to continue, and created a space where the woman could feel safe and valued. It was a rare and beautiful moment, one that showed the power of patience, attention, and human kindness. A few guests continued to watch from a distance, their curiosity turning into quiet admiration. They had come to see wealth and glamour, but what they were witnessing was far more profound, a genuine connection between two people from completely different worlds. The young girl remained unaware of their attention, focused entirely on the woman before her. She had discovered that true courage was quiet and that empathy could create bridges where barriers had long existed. The woman shared a memory from her youth that made the young girl pause for a moment. She thought carefully about how to respond, signing slowly and clearly to ensure the woman understood. When the woman's eyes lit up in recognition and relief, the young girl felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had helped someone feel heard, seen, and understood in a world that often overlooked people who did not fit a certain mold. The gala continued, but the young girl and the woman existed in a world of their own making. Every sign, every gesture, every shared smile strengthened their bond. The young girl realized that this was not just about tonight. It was about the impact one person could have on another's life, even in a brief encounter. She had become more than a server. She had become a bridge, a helper, and a friend. The staff exchanged quiet words of encouragement, inspired by the young girl's example. Some even adjusted how they approached their own duties, taking care to notice the small ways they could help others. The young girl did not see these changes, but she felt their energy in the room, a subtle ripple of kindness spreading from her actions. The woman signed a question that made the young girl think carefully before responding. She moved her hands slowly, deliberately, making sure the meaning was clear. The woman's face lit up in understanding, and she signed back a small, appreciative gesture. It was a moment of silent communication, a reassurance that the connection between them was real and meaningful. The young girl felt a quiet pride, knowing that her actions had made a real difference. The gala guests continued their conversations, some still watching with curiosity, but the young girl remained focused. She had found a purpose that was more important than status, wealth, or recognition. She was helping someone feel included and valued, and that was a reward in itself. Her hands moved with confidence, her gestures filled with care, and the woman responded with growing trust and warmth. The woman shared more memories, some touching, some joyful, and the young girl responded with understanding and encouragement. Each moment built a stronger bridge between them, a connection that transcended social class and status. The young girl realized that small acts of empathy could have a powerful impact, creating bonds that lasted far beyond a single evening. As the gala began to wind down, the young girl continued to check in on the woman, ensuring she was comfortable and happy. She moved with care, guiding the conversation and offering support without drawing attention to herself. The woman's expressions of gratitude and warmth filled her with a sense of accomplishment and fulfillment. She had done something meaningful, something that could not be measured by wealth or recognition. Hours passed, and the gala slowly came to an end. The young girl felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that she had made a difference in someone's life. She had discovered her own strength, her courage, and the power of empathy. She had stepped forward in a room full of wealth and status and had created a connection that was real, human, and unforgettable. As the guests began to leave, the young girl returned to her duties, carrying her tray carefully. Her mind remained with the billionaire's mother, and she felt a sense of pride and warmth that she had never experienced before. The connection they had built would stay with both of them long after the gala ended. The young girl had learned that even in the most glamorous and exclusive settings, human kindness and empathy could shine brighter than any chandelier, leaving a lasting impact on those who experienced it. The gala was slowly coming to an end. The music had softened, and the guests were starting to leave, their conversations becoming quieter as they prepared to step back into the night. The young girl carried her tray carefully, but her mind was still with the billionaire's mother. Throughout the evening, she had discovered a courage and empathy within herself that she had never known existed. She had connected with someone in a way that transcended status, wealth, and social boundaries, and it had changed her in a quiet, profound way. The billionaire's mother noticed her approach and signed a simple, grateful message. The young girl responded with a gentle smile and a nod, showing that she had been listening and that she cared. The woman's eyes shone with warmth and trust, and the young girl felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that she had made a difference in this person's life. It was not about recognition or reward. It was about the small human connection they had built together, one gesture at a time. As the young girl moved among the guests for her final rounds, she noticed a few whispers and glances directed her way. Some of the wealthy attendees had observed the interaction with curiosity and even admiration. They had come to see luxury and status, but they had witnessed something far more valuable: genuine kindness and empathy bridging worlds that rarely crossed. The young girl did not seek their attention. She was focused on the person who had trusted her and shared her world, and that was enough. The woman decided to share one last story, something personal and touching. The young girl leaned in, signing back carefully, encouraging her to continue. Each movement of her hands, each gesture, was filled with patience and understanding. The woman's eyes sparkled as she recounted the memory, and the young girl responded with empathy and warmth. They shared a silent laughter, a quiet joy that needed no words to be understood. In that moment, the young girl realized the power of listening, of being present, and of offering genuine attention to someone who needed it. The staff around them watched quietly, inspired by the young girl's courage and empathy. Many had worked in the house for years, observing the boundaries between themselves and the wealthy family. Yet here was a young girl who had crossed that invisible line, not arrogantly, but with humility and care. She had created a bridge that no wealth or status could replace, simply by being human and kind. The staff exchanged smiles and nods, recognizing the impact of her actions. The woman signed again, expressing her deep gratitude. The young girl responded with a soft smile and a gentle gesture, acknowledging the bond they had created. It was a quiet moment, filled with unspoken understanding and shared warmth. The young girl felt a sense of pride, not in herself, but in the connection they had formed. It was a reminder that kindness and empathy were powerful tools, capable of creating lasting impressions in ways that wealth and privilege could not. As the guests began to take their leave, the young girl continued her duties, ensuring that the woman was comfortable and supported. Each interaction was filled with care, each gesture deliberate and thoughtful. The woman's expressions of trust and gratitude filled the young girl with a quiet joy, knowing that she had helped someone feel valued and understood. It was a small act in a grand hall of wealth, but its significance was immeasurable. The evening was drawing to a close, and the young girl had finished her final rounds. She returned to the billionaire's mother, who reached out with a warm, appreciative smile. The young girl knelt slightly, returning the gesture of respect, and signed a simple farewell message. The woman's eyes glistened, a mixture of happiness and heartfelt appreciation. It was a moment that neither of them would forget, a memory that would linger long after the gala had ended. As the last guests departed and the lights dimmed, the young girl reflected on the evening. She had discovered that courage was not always loud, and that true strength could be found in small, thoughtful actions. She had reached across a world of wealth and status to offer understanding and connection, and in doing so had created a lasting impact. The billionaire's mother had been seen and heard in a way that night, and the young girl had been the bridge for that connection. Her mother, who had worked quietly in the background all these years, would be proud, though she did not yet know the depth of the evening's events. The young girl had shown that empathy, patience, and understanding could transform lives. She had learned that even a single person, regardless of age or social standing, could create ripples of kindness that extended far beyond the immediate moment. The young girl carefully gathered the remaining trays, her thoughts still with the woman she had connected with. She had witnessed firsthand the quiet power of empathy, and she carried it with her like a treasure. The gala, with all its glamour and opulence, had provided the backdrop, but the real story had been the human connection she had fostered. It was something that could not be bought, measured, or replicated, and that made it all the more precious. Before leaving, the young girl signed a final message to the woman, wishing her happiness and health. The woman signed back, her face radiant with appreciation. They exchanged a small, meaningful gesture, a silent promise that the bond they had formed would not be forgotten. The young girl felt a warmth in her heart, a quiet satisfaction that came from knowing she had made a difference in someone's life through simple, thoughtful actions. As she stepped outside into the cool night air, the young girl took a deep breath. The world felt a little larger, a little more full of possibility. She had discovered a power within herself that she had never known, the ability to create connection, to offer kindness, and to make someone feel valued. The gala, with all its wealth and grandeur, had become a place where her humanity had shone brightest. Walking home, she reflected on the lessons of the evening. She understood now that courage could be quiet, that empathy could bridge worlds, and that small acts of kindness could leave lasting impressions. She had learned that being human, being present, and being caring could create ripples that extended far beyond what anyone could immediately see. The young girl knew that she would carry these lessons with her forever, using them to navigate her own life and to touch the lives of others in meaningful ways. Back at home, she helped her mother clean up and shared a quiet smile, thinking of the billionaire's mother and the connection they had formed. She felt proud, not because of recognition or reward, but because she had acted from the heart. She had discovered the power of her own actions, and that power was something that could never be taken away. The night had been extraordinary, not because of wealth or grandeur, but because of human connection. The young girl had stepped forward in a world that often separated people by status, and she had created a bridge through patience, empathy, and care. It was a story of courage, of kindness, and of the lasting impact one person could have on another. She had learned that sometimes, the smallest gestures carried the greatest meaning, and that those gestures could change lives in ways that would never be forgotten. As she finally lay down to rest, the young girl felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had discovered that true greatness was not measured by wealth or power, but by the ability to touch lives with compassion and understanding. The connection she had formed with the billionaire's mother had transformed her, leaving a mark on her heart that would remain forever. And she knew, without a doubt, that this was only the beginning of a life guided by empathy, courage, and quiet, meaningful acts of kindness.